Hey everyone, we are very excited to announce the launch of Gerber Kawasaki's digital assets program in partnership with Gemini Trust Company. My name is Zach Bainter, and I'm the director of GK's crypto offering. Our team has been hard at work becoming one of the first wealth management firms to offer digital assets like Bitcoin and Ether to our clients as another asset class to further diversify their portfolios. Today, I'm joined by two of the most innovative minds in the financial industry. I'm thrilled to introduce Tyler Winklevoss, CEO and co-founder of Gemini, the leading digital currency exchange and custodian that he founded with his brother back in 2014. Tyler's been at the front line of the revolution towards digital gold, and Gemini is by far the safest custodian on the planet, something that is especially important to us at GK. Then, of course, I'm also joined by our fearless leader, Ross Gerber. Not too long after Gemini's inception, Ross began seeing the validity and potential of Bitcoin himself. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for having us.
So we have lots to cover today as we kick off this partnership. So let's begin with you, Tyler. You were an early adopter of Bitcoin and famously began investing 10 years ago when the price of Bitcoin was below $10. You and your brother Cameron were the first legitimate investors to amass a large stake in Bitcoin when no other VCs would touch it. I want to ask, was this pure speculation at the time, or are we living your original vision?
So we when we first saw Bitcoin, we're like, hey, this is the first money that's purpose-built for the internet, by the same type of people who built the internet. It's not money built by bankers shoehorning on the internet. And we looked at its characteristics, and it had the characteristics of gold, but actually did better. So we think of Bitcoin as gold 2.0. So when you put that in the context of all the money printing and the spending and the ballooning debt that's happening in fiat regimes, Bitcoin is the ultimate hedge. It's the hardest money in the galaxy. And so we think of it as disrupting gold. So even though it's appreciated a lot from here, and since we first founded $8, the market today is still around 1 trillion, and gold is around 10. So we think there's a 10x from here. But ultimately, the small bull case scenario for Bitcoin is that is gold 2.0 is your ultimate hedge against uncertainty and chaos and hyperinflation.
Yeah, the thing about, I think, you that really intrigued me was, I got introduced to Bitcoin, a while back, and it was a very low price, like $150, $250. And I was introduced by some original guys who were OGs, and what blew my mind in reading, like the book Bitcoin Billionaires, a great book worth reading about your journey, was that at the time I had so much distrust in the people that were pitching me, and they had the kind of backgrounds that, even though I was friends with them, I was kind of like, how much money am I really going to put into this? So I put like 5,000, you know what I mean? And I thought I was like gone. And so I really give you a lot of credit, because you sort of went all in on something at a time that, to call it risky is almost like not even accurate. Obviously, you've made a lot of money doing this, but I don't think that was your purpose. But I think what gets me is where was the confidence that it was going to become this? Was it you really believed in the algorithm and the actual technology, or was it more like the people and the ecosystem? Like, where did you build the confidence to invest so much money into Bitcoin?
So I think that early on, we couldn't understand how this wouldn't work. A lot of people were worried about the regulatory aspects of it, but to shut down Bitcoin is really to shut down the internet itself.
Right.
And so you can't really do that. We actually did the work. We talked to a lot of Bitcoiners. We asked these questions like, why isn't this just like another PayPal or Airline Miles? And all the answers were, well, it's a fixed supply, cryptography, the math. It set us on this journey of learning where we're like, wait, okay. And then you start re-examining also the money you have and that you inherited. It doesn't really work well on the internet. The joke is that if you want to get money even from New York to London, and it's a Friday night and there's a bank holiday on a Monday, right? You wire that, it's not getting there till Tuesday or Wednesday. You're actually better off going to JFK, hopping a plane with a bag of cash and taking the red eye. And how is it that this is going back to the year 2012, we know money is just information. We know we can send an email to someone instantly for free. Why doesn't our money work that way? And you kind of go back to the technological breakthrough. They couldn't figure out how to put money on the internet when they started the commercial internet in the early 90s. It's just like this placeholder. And until Satoshi came along, invented Bitcoin, and sort of cracked that nut, so to speak, it wasn't possible, but it was something people aspired to. And so looking at the history of money, the history of the internet, it's like, this actually works. This is the first form of money that works like your email.
But you fundamentally trusted the algorithm. See, that's where I was like kind of stuck for a while, was like, okay, they built this algorithm and I get how it works, but like, what happens if, and I had like 100 what happens if questions, and I tested Bitcoin myself, and I bought something, which is one of my favorite stories. I spent 3 Bitcoin to buy a Dell computer and an NVIDIA chip. And that's the computer my kid uses now for school. And I think it's worth 180,000.
Right.
Well, it's not worth 180,000. I spent 180,000 for a computer, but I knew it worked. But I still had this like distrust. Like, what happens if it just disappeared? And then Mt. Gox happened, and I was like, this could easily disappear. So that's the part I think that really impresses me about your journey, is that those things didn't shake your confidence.
It's a good point. There's 2 things, right? There's trusting the protocol Bitcoin, and then the companies built on top of it.
Right.
And so we actually bought a lot of our early Bitcoin on Mt. Gox, and it didn't, any user knew that there was a lot of issues with that setup. The website would brown out whenever there was a spike in volume. It would take sometimes minutes to get an order confirmation. But also when I looked at like, okay, why can't someone just guess your private key and talk to cryptographers? The amount of combinations that you'd have to brute force for a Bitcoin private key, there are more than there are observable atoms in the universe. So right. that's a fancy way of saying no one, not the world's strongest computers would take a century to crack it. So I started understanding the math of why this was secure, the hash algorithms and stuff. And it's really interesting, but I got really comfortable with Bitcoin itself, much less so comfortable with the companies built on top of it. Mt. Gox imploded, right. Whatever you want to call it. We don't even really know if they lost their key, they got hacked.
They stole it.
Maybe. But that informed us of what needed to be done for the infrastructure built on top of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency for it to mainstream. So that got us, we looked to invest in other companies doing this, but we couldn't really get comfortable with, they wanted to go offshore, didn't really believe in regulation. So ultimately we said, we're gonna have to do this ourselves. And we started Gemini, we picked up the phone, we actually testified at the New York Department of Financial Services hearing, picked up the phone, say, how can we get licensed? We wanna do this legit in the US, onshore. We want this to look and feel secure with high integrity, just like the best bank you might go to or financial institution on Wall Street. And we started that conversation, got licensed, built a team of world-class security engineers and whatnot, and built the experience that we wanted to see happen, and would bring ourselves more into this, would bring you into crypto, because crypto was going to be this amazing idea and utopic island. But if people had to traverse Mt. Gox or whatnot, nobody was going to do it, or rather, like, it was just too risky. It was never.
Yeah, that's right.
So we built Gemini as this regulated bridge from Wall Street into this magical new frontier. And obviously that started with Bitcoin. Now we have Ethereum, we have DeFi, we have NFTs. So there's so much more you can go into. But the idea is that, like, the current system of finance is really being rebuilt in a decentralized manner,
right,
through crypto. And Gemini is very much your bridge or portal into that. And we want to link up to the current fiat banking system, Wall Street, and help folks feel comfortable that they can engage with this new world of money and new world of finance without ultimately getting burned, without losing their money.
Well, that's why we're here, because I'm, a highly skeptical person when it comes to investing, because we treat our assets, like almost like it's ours, all of our assets. Right. We do not want to lose people's money. So I'm proud to say that we're one of the first RIAs to walk over your bridge, because you built an amazing bridge. And we've dealt with Wall Street firms for our traditional finance my entire career, 27 years. And as we were saying before the show, like our experience with you guys from day one has been on par or better than the largest financial institutions in this country. So I give you guys a lot of credit, because we did not go into this with the intent, like, we're going to do this for sure. We got into this with the intent of, can Gemini meet our standards to protect our clients? Because we will not blow up our business on Bitcoin. And the fact that we've come this far with you is a testament to what a great business and opportunity you've created for investors. So, great job.
Yeah. Thank you. Tyler, can you talk about some of that coverage that Gemini has, these additional steps that really sets you apart from other custodians?
Yeah. So for starters, we are a technology company first. We are not a financial institution or a bank that is technology enabled. So like I was saying early on, it was really important to hire the best security engineers in the world to build our cold storage system, our hot wallet, to enforce security practices on accounts like 2FA, strong passwords. Basically, taking all of this important knowledge that hadn't been built before cryptocurrency, and really build with a security first mentality, but also a ask for permission, not forgiveness mentality. We talked with regulators, we engaged with them, we shaped the regulation, we helped shape the BIT license. We're a New York trust company, but it's sort of we were very instrumental in the licensing and how they thought about that. So it's about not operating without that license, really building a collaborative relationship with the regulators. And the DFS is the largest, it's the bank and insurance regulator in the state of New York. And so we built that collaborative relationship. We built Gemini right from day one to take on all the security things. And I think that's really what sets us apart. This isn't just a technology problem, even though we are a technology company first and foremost, but it's a compliance, licensing, and security problem. And unfortunately, the path and the history of cryptocurrency is littered with the carcasses of companies that did this wrong.
Right.
Now, Gox being one of them. You had an exchange where a CEO maybe died or maybe faked his death, the Quadriga. So there's been these bridge burning lacks of trust, and that was our thing. We didn't have to do this. We could have just invested in Bitcoin, but we didn't really like the way the landscape was unfolding. So we said, look, if we're going to do this, well, we should do this. And the only way to do this is to do this the right way. And so we've sort of those pillars of security, licensing, compliance, product, technology. Right. We've never compromised on any of those. And I think that's ultimately what makes Gemini different than the rest.
Oh, and for sure different, because, one of the things that cost me a lot of money now in hindsight was Coinbase, because I had my money at Coinbase and then I had problems. And when I tried to deal with them, I couldn't get an answer to save my life. And I was calling one of the even founders, and I was like, dude, I can't get my Bitcoin out, it's there's all these issues, and they had no customer service, and they had no, no way to solve your problems at all. And I was like, this is not going to work for finance long term, and Coinbase has gotten better over the period of time, but they're, I was like, somebody's got to do this right. And I think that's what's so impressive about the way you've approached it was understanding what you said earlier. I'm not going to just do this, get in trouble and fix it. I'm going to do this right the first time. And that's actually what we're trying to do on our end, from the SEC perspective, from the RIA compliance perspective, from internally on our side. We've spent weeks, if not months, just focusing on legal and compliance procedures and forms and documentation, so that between your systems and our systems, we've now created a way for individual investors to buy Bitcoin with help, use a firm, and then be connected to a highly reputable, I guess you're a broker or custodian of digital assets. And that's why I think you have an amazing future ahead of you with Gemini, because I think as investors realize how important security and customer service really is and getting advice, platforms like ours and yours are just going to explode.
Yeah, and it's a slower, longer road to do it right.
Right.
But one of our values is the long game. We want to be here for the next couple of decades at least doing this. And so you can play the limited time only game and it can be very profitable. But ultimately it usually ends in tears. Right. And so, we've made it a point to do this the right way, because we don't think that crypto is just this, short-term thing. It's not a fad. We think it's the most important invention since the internet itself.
Right.
So we think in a decade, 5, 10 years, quarter centuries, it is the ultimate social network. It is the social network of money. So it's
I call it the internet of money. That's what I call it.
So instead of trading, sharing pictures and making connections, there's actually economic value, which is super significant. So the long game, doing this right, we wanted to build this so literally we can have this conversation with folks like yourselves, has been years in the making.
Right.
But we think ultimately a thoughtfully regulated cryptocurrency market will be the healthiest, the most vibrant. And we look at the financial markets around the world, the ones with no regulation, that's not a great thing. The ones with too much regulation, that sort of stifles innovation. And the financial centers that have grown the most, look at Singapore, a fishing village, right? Now it's a massive hub, right? And not that much time because of thoughtful regulation. So we always want to engage with the regulators and help them get that right, and ultimately be compliant, so we can continue to have these conversations with you and continue to bring people along this incredible new journey.
Well, I think that's what Bitcoin needed to get to the next level, is stewards like yourself and my firm and some of the ones that are also now getting involved that are good stewards and have good reputation of working with people successfully for long periods of time, so that people can build confidence in the ecosystem. Because when AOL started, I didn't have a lot of confidence in the internet either, and it was going down every day. And that's how Bitcoin started too. So if you look at how far the internet's come and you start extrapolating out where Bitcoin and Ethereum and digital assets can go, I had this sort of epiphany in the middle of the night last night. And I was like, man, if the governments keep printing money like this and they keep running stuff this badly, a whole new world of decentralized finance and maybe even the systems that we have as governments might change too, because essentially the governments of the world haven't really been good stewards of our capital and our needs. And so I don't want to get into that today, because we could talk about that all day. And I'd love to do that one day. But I think that the future very much is this internet of money, and investors would be making a huge mistake not to be participating.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Bitcoin is non-state, non-government money. And that's super important as a checks and balance, because as you mentioned, it's not just what we've had the Keynesian tools we've had to avail ourselves to get through the pandemic, but it's the fact that the money has been being printed and the debt's been growing for the decade up to it. And Bitcoin people are waking up to the idea that Bitcoin is actually a better hedge to inflation than gold. And investors need that access. So it's really important to give them that access and build that bridge with the partnerships like the ones we have.
I mean, Bitcoin has more utility than gold, I mean, I have gold coins and, it's nice to hold them and my kids like them, but when you think about having money on your phone or the internet of money or money that could theoretically be used in any country in the world without any currency exchange or being able to transfer money to people all over the world, there's a huge value in that, ability with Bitcoin that gold really just can't even do. So I think gold makes sense from a 5,000 year perspective. But if you're looking into the future for the next 5,000 years, one couldn't even compare the two assets,
Yeah, I mean, Paul Tudor Jones, I think, said it well. In the 70s, gold was his trade, a famous trade against the inflation, but that's because Bitcoin wasn't invented. Today, we have Bitcoin. So we have something that's even better than gold, better at being gold than gold. So he's, his trade now for all the money printing and what he calls the great monetary inflation that's coming is Bitcoin.
Yeah. Zach?
Yep. Another thing we want. Sorry, go ahead, Tyler.
No, Zach, go ahead.
Yeah. No, Gemini is also the first exchange to pass independent SOC exams for those non-accountants out there, which is probably the majority of everyone listening in today. What does that mean, and why should that give our clients added confidence?
Yeah. So there's the SOC 2 type 2 and SOC 1 type 2. They're performed by Deloitte, an independent auditor, and SOC 1's more financial oriented, and the SOC 2 is more security, compliance, controls, internal controls, basically the stuff that Mt. Gox didn't have that caused it to fail. So what we've done at Gemini is basically build a constellation of trust around our offering. And so we do that by obviously doing what we say we're going to do, but also bringing in third parties. You become licensed and regulated. So the New York DFS, bank examiners sit in our office for at least 5 weeks a year and look over our shoulder and make sure we're doing what we say we do. We can also do that via audits, which we perform every year, and it's part of being regulated. But the SOC 2 type 2 and the SOC 1 type 2 attestation examinations by Deloitte are another version of a third independent party making sure we are doing what we're saying we're doing, which is the definition of integrity, right? And so we would do this anyway, but I think it's really comforting to users and people who don't know us to see that, hey, New York State is doing this, Deloitte is doing this, and other people are confirming what they're saying. So doing all of that, and we've also done this not just for our custodial piece, but our exchange piece, and for the SOC 2 type 1, SOC 1 type 2, which is, I believe, a first for a cryptocurrency platform. And so we do all of these things that sometimes aren't fun and they take time, they're very expensive, but they're super important to allowing us ultimately for you guys to get comfortable, for us to have this conversation. And basically, one day that when Ray Dalio comes around to Bitcoin, he's getting close, to make it possible for Bridgewater to get in. I mean, what if we were in a future where they're comfortable with the investment, but they can't find a platform to work with? They can't get.
Well, that's been a big problem for a long time, actually, with Bitcoin, because years back, somebody wanted to buy $100,000 of Bitcoin and I couldn't handle it. And I was like, he's like, well, send me somewhere. And I was like, honestly, I don't even know who can take $100,000 trade of Bitcoin other than really just going to Coinbase, I guess, and trying to do it manually, and Bitcoin has come such a long way, but you're absolutely right. And this is kind of our bet too, is that we're trying to be one of the first institutions. That's one of the reasons we're doing it, because when Bridgewater does get in, what's going to happen to the price of Bitcoin then, right? So it's like our clients are going to be much better served because we've taken these steps before Bridgewater than Bridgewater's clients. And I think that's what's coming next for Bitcoin, is a major rally as more and more institutions realize what we're doing is what they should be doing. And there is a place you can do this safely with Gemini. And if I don't put some of my assets here, people are going to start calling me going, I'm negligent as a money manager.
Well, that's absolutely right. Like the the risky, reckless investment is to not have one, or not even
absolutely
not even understand it. And if we're all right about Bitcoin, which I believe we will be, the worst position to be is the last one in it.
Well, that's always the worst position in most things.
Yeah,
so
it's just simple supply and demand, but it's still so early. I mean, you look at, Tesla's got Bitcoin on its balance sheet. Right. Square has Bitcoin on its balance sheet. I just got off.
We have it.
Got it. Caruso Real Estate, one of the largest real estate companies in America, has it now.
So you're dealing with Rick?
Yeah. I was just on CNBC with him. We were talking.
That's funny. I was just having lunch. He was right next to me like 2 days ago.
Really? Cool.
Yeah, because he owns the mall by my house, and so the restaurant's named after his dad, and he eats there all the time. So I see him like, he's a sharp guy. He's like one of the sharpest guys in business.
Yeah, he's a visionary, and he's figured out that Bitcoin is the world's best hedge against inflation, but also cryptocurrency is really important to any 21st century experience. And the Grove is an incredible experience, whether it's through payments, crypto rewards, NFTs to commemorate different, things, moments, and whatnot. So anyway, it's starting to happen with companies. You've got a couple, but there's a world where every Fortune 500 or 1,000 company has Bitcoin on its balance sheet. There's also a world where central banks had Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And like you said, you are doing your clients a service, giving them the opportunity to get Bitcoin now, because that tsunami and tidal wave is coming. It will come. I don't know if it will be this year, but I do believe it will be within no less than 10, probably inside of 5, maybe even inside of 3. Right?
Yeah, I think it's a 5-year thing. Like in the next 5 years,
having exposure now, like, you don't want to come in after those 1,000 Fortune companies and after the central banks. You want to be an early adopter, and the value will accrue to you for taking that position. So I think it's great that you guys are giving your customers that opportunity, because none of the investment banks on Wall Street that I know of we're giving their clients exposure to this. And I think
there's a couple issues too. One is they don't get it. So like, you can go sit down with them and explain it to them, but they just, they're like, forget it. It's just like, do not compute. So it's like, that was the same thing. We were big Tesla investors, original Tesla investors. And for a long, even to this day, I still argue on TV with people who don't get it. And I'm like, if you don't get Elon at this point, like, when are you ever going to get it? Right. And so it's like, when you think about Bitcoin, so my whole thing about investing in my life is you can buy the S&P 500, you can buy Microsoft, and Microsoft's going to do great, but there are certain things that come around, and they don't come around very often. And there's risk involved. But if you don't invest in those things, you will never have better returns. And so it's a risk not to be involved with things like Bitcoin or Tesla, because that's what's changing the world. And so like, when you think about investing and you think about 5 years, which is a normal, I think a short-term time horizon, and you think about how much cash is on the balance sheet of the S&P 500 right now and how inefficient that is. Like a company like Apple, the inefficiency of the cash on their balance sheet is disgusting. And so when Tesla went and just bought $1.5 billion of Bitcoin, which actually made them $1 billion right off the bat, as a Tesla shareholder, I was thrilled. But I had to argue with some other very smart Tesla shareholders who didn't like the idea. And I was like, dude, they have 20 billion. Like, what's $1.5 billion? They're making money. If it sits in cash, essentially they lose money if they don't spend it. And so it's like, that's our bet, is that as companies figure this out, as individuals figure this out, that all this cash they have on their balance sheets that are essentially being printed into oblivion, they're going to say, well, why don't I just transfer it into this? And so this wave is like the trickle. And I think, the next wave is going to be huge. It's going to be huge. I don't know when that's going to be, but it'll be huge.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, the cash is hemorrhaging value real time.
Yeah, like 15% a year. If you look at how much we're printing for how much debt we have, in essence, inflation's like 15% a year.
Yeah, and you won't hear that. I mean, it feels like the media will talk about the CPI and the cost of like a loaf of bread, but the inflation's really happening elsewhere. It's happening in assets. Look at the stock market. How is the stock market ripping and hitting all-time highs during the middle of a pandemic and a lockdown? It just seems untethered from reality. Like the businesses haven't fundamentally changed, yet their stock prices are.
Well, yeah, but I made this argument last year, or it was like early end of last year, that you actually didn't make any money in the stock market. It was up 10%, but they printed 10% more money. So if you look at your return in gold terms, you actually didn't make money. And so if you think of yourself as a global citizen and not just a US citizen who lives in dollars, and God forbid you live your life in Bitcoin terms, right? You lost a ton of money in the stock market. So like the way we perceive the gaining of value based off the inflation of our currency, it's like real estate. People are like, why is real estate up 15%? It's actually up the exact amount that we print money.
Yeah.
So real estate has not gone up. It's just the value of our dollar is going down rapidly. So other assets have a perceived value that's much greater. And that's why I think like investing in Bitcoin is almost like a no-brainer, because they're just like continuing like one bill after the next. They don't even talk in billions anymore,
Right.
It's not even a term.
Yeah. I mean, the greatest decision I think of anybody they make in their life is where are they going to store their life force in all of the value that they've accrued? And if you put it in dollars, you're losing it, right? Bitcoin is the perfect hedge to that. But many people don't have that ability to get that exposure. You're seeing a lot of these banks on Wall Street, these headlines, they're going to get Bitcoin exposure. They're going to offer it at some point because their clients have been asking for years. They've seen what's happened to the price of Bitcoin. It's the best performing asset of last decade. It's going to be the best performing one this decade. The year is 2021, and the private wealth managers at the best banks that charge these fees cannot provide the exposure or the opportunity to their clients. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's why we're doing it. We're the place. So if you want to buy Bitcoin, you come to Gerber Kawasaki and we'll buy you Bitcoin through Gemini. You're going to be custodian at Gemini, and you're working with, I think the best firm in Bitcoin. And we looked at all of them, and there's not that many to look at. You know what I mean? And that's, I think, why this is such a huge opportunity for investors to actually get advice from our side, but also get all the benefits of working with Gemini in the same place, and for actually a cost that's less than buying a Bitcoin on Coinbase, which is crazy because the fees are still so high at Coinbase. I assume you saw their numbers. It's crazy, right?
Yeah, and the other point I would say is that a lot of people have heard about Bitcoin, but there's also Ether,
right?
And other protocols. There's DeFi. This is a journey that continues to grow. If we were having this conversation 2 years ago, we probably, or maybe even a year ago, we wouldn't be talking about decentralized finance.
No, we wouldn't have.
And so I think the biggest mistake is not doing the work and writing this off. And really, like, Bitcoin's the gateway drug. It's the starting point to this new movement and revolution. Just like there are stories where Jeff Bezos had to explain to early investors what's the internet. And so and there are venture capital funds who were going to only invest in internet companies, and they had to defend that to their LPs because it was so niche.
I mean, my first manager in my first office in 1994 asked me why I was bringing in a laptop to work, Yeah. And I was like, dude, this is the future of finance. Like, I'm going to trade online. And it was like Charles Schwab account, And he's like, dude, you're being distracted by this laptop, Like, go use the typewriter and fill out your insurance app. And I was like, dude, I'm never using the typewriter, you know? And people were like mad at me that I brought in a computer. And I was like, dude, one day there's going to be a computer on every desk in this office. And they like laughed at me. I swear to God.
Yeah, no.
1994.
My dad's a technology entrepreneur, and one of the big bets he made was that a personal computer would be, he was building software and the bet was secularly that personal computers would be on every desk.
Right. That was my first big win. Was Dell and Gateway.
It was like kind of a crazy idea in the late 70s. And so these things,
oh, it's definitely in the late 70s,
early 80s. Yeah. Like that whole era, right? These things that seem niche and small, like you wake up one day, not too far in the future, and they are everything.
That's right.
Everything. It is everywhere. It is bigger, more important than the internet itself. These technology companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, whatnot, like these niche things. Oh, it's just a bookseller. All of a sudden, they're the biggest drivers of the U.S. economy. That's the movie that we're watching, and that is the movie that will unfold with cryptocurrency. Bitcoin's a starting point. Ether's another great starting point, but there's so much going on there. Like, what's for sure is that if we have this conversation even a year from now, like things will be so different.
Yeah,
so interesting.
I agree.
So again, it goes back to the danger of like doing nothing, putting cash in a mattress, or you're
right
where you earn nothing or negative. That to me is the craziest bet in the casino of life.
Oh, for sure. I mean, just the fact that banks don't pay interest and clearly take risk. I mean, look at Credit Suisse losing $5 billion on a horrible trade. Like, I thought those days were over with Dodd-Frank. So you put your money in a bank and they're betting with like on crazy stuff, and like they pay you no interest. So it's like until banks start actually paying people interest and the government actually stops printing money, like essentially Bitcoin can only go up. Like there's no other way for it because, you know, governments are horribly irresponsible. There's no other way, you know. But I did miss Amazon and I did miss Google at the beginning because I didn't get it. And I was like, who's going to buy books, you know, online? And I didn't see the bigger picture for many years. And then I eventually got into these stocks and made a lot of money late. But when you do that too, I was early on some things and I missed some things, you know, and like, that's why now at my age and my experience level, you have to invest in these things. Like you have to, because you don't want to wake up and you're like, oh, I watched Bitcoin go up 10,000% and I just watched it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not, it's also like, it's not just one thing. It's a movement. It's a revolution. And so there's a rising tide. And I think, look at, not to digress, but like the GameStop saga, people are looking for a more level playing field. Everybody's turned into an investor. They realize there was an idea before the pandemic, right? If you show up to work, you make a living, at least you can provide for yourself. Nobody really thought there'd be a point where you're not allowed to show up to work. It's unlawful to do so because we're in the middle of a pandemic. So people are waking up to the fact that like, hey, I need to be an investor. I need to have a plan B. I need to accumulate assets and wealth that will
financial security.
Yeah, independent security, literacy that will grow when I'm sleeping. And so we have a whole new generation of investors that are taking this into their own hands and are looking at alternatives like Bitcoin in crypto. So it's just super interesting. There's this movement and sea change happening, and where they're going to end up is going to be in crypto and Bitcoin because it's a level playing field. It's just more fair.
Well, we're seeing that already because we deal with the retail public and we don't just deal with rich people. We deal with all people at my firm. That's kind of the innovation we have is we give financial advice and scale. So like our clients represent all types of people and it skews younger because that's who are clients, we serve a lot of these clients.
Yeah.
But when we have people coming in with half their portfolio in Bitcoin and half their portfolio in Tesla, like that's literally very common. And I posted something the other day on Twitter, and a lot of people were like, yeah, I have my money in Bitcoin, I have my money in Tesla and stuff like that. And I was like, obviously you're comfortable with risk, and but like that's the way young people see investing, and in fact, what we're seeing is young people clearly have a much clearer view of the future than middle-aged and older people who are still clinging on to a past that's well gone, So I think young people get it. And I think what you're saying is true. They want to participate, and Bitcoin is like pretty democratic in nature. So it's like allows people, where the stock market, people like me just have a natural edge over individuals because, we're institutions and we've got that, we got the big stack at the poker table. So, it is an advantage. I mean, there's no question. And so I think that's another thing about Bitcoins that's really appealing is it's a freedom from government control, and it's an ability for people to participate in something that they feel inherently they've been left out. And that's, I think, why there's such a grassroots movement around Bitcoin. And it's not just in the United States, it's a global grassroots movement of people who want to have control over their money and their futures and not have the government determining their lives.
Yeah. I mean, if Twitter and YouTube made us all our own broadcasters, Bitcoin and crypto makes you your own bank. And
that's right.
On the smartphone, a bank account in your pocket. And so, I think it's just, I know it is a fairer system, and that's just where people will end up because, why not?
Well, I think that was the original argument that got me into Bitcoin, was that in many countries, they don't have banking systems. Like I deal with some people in Nigeria. Actually, I did some seminar there, and I have all these friends in Nigeria now. And I never understood how sophisticated they were with money in Nigeria, but it's actually like the crossroads of business in Africa. And they're really into Bitcoin, and now they're really into the stock market. And I was like, yeah, if you think about living in Nigeria, you're a sophisticated person, and like you got to deal with the Nigerian government and the Nigerian banking system. Like it sucks. And so they move their money into Bitcoin. It makes sense. If you live in Argentina or like you live in Turkey, it just makes sense. So it's a global way for people to free themselves from the tyranny of government. And that's why China's cracked down. That's why we're seeing India crack down, is because there's so much corruption in India. If they can't control their money, that's bad for them. So they're just like trying to shut it down. They're going to learn the hard way. People just move their money out of India.
Yeah. No, and I think that's right. Like choices are super healthy, right? It keeps everyone in check. The idea of money only being the purview of government's really dangerous, right? Because we've seen governments abuse that, use money, capital controls to manipulate their populace, or just like you were saying earlier, like poor stewardship, printing too much, hyperinflating, like Argentina.
I mean, look at our homeless problem.
Yeah, right. I mean, government.
They can print the money and put people in homes. Like, what a genius idea!
What could go wrong, right?
I mean, they're giving it to people for nothing. Why not, solve a problem? I don't know.
Yeah, and if you go back to the history of Bitcoin, the genesis is the government. It's the financial crisis of 2008.
Absolutely.
And so. At least in my lifetime, there's been a couple of some I didn't remember, 87, but every 5-10 years, the tech bubble, whatnot. And I think people are just tired. They're fatigued of trusting. There's just too much. As Satoshi said, the root of the problem is all the trust that's required in the system.
Yeah.
So when I came to Bitcoin, I was like, wait, I'm trusting math and cryptography. There's no such thing as insider trading because everyone knows the rules and no one has an advantage, not even Satoshi. This is a beautiful, brilliant system that I can really get on board. At least it's predictable. You understand when the Bitcoin supply is coming out, when it's, the halvings are coming. It's just like perfect system. And it's not to say that there may not be a place for government money. But it's great to have the options. And I think when you don't have the options, that's when things start to go sideways.
Well, it's like a check and balance in my mind. Like I would hold more government money if they were responsible with it. And so if I earned interest and they didn't print it and give it away, then maybe I'd hold some of it. But I don't earn interest. So I'm just losing money, like a substantial amount of money holding dollars. And so I think that check and balance element of Bitcoin is what governments don't like about it, but it also represents a very valuable part of what Bitcoin is, because Bitcoin, I always thought Trump was going to be great for Bitcoin. And after the coup, I was like, there's no question Bitcoin's going up now. And sure enough, look at Bitcoin, right? Because what Trump proved was like, you could actually destroy our democracy, and then we got a real problem. And so it's even more appealing for investors to have diversification into assets like Bitcoin, because what happens if the coup won?
Mm-hmm.
And people don't want to think about that.
And also even things like, my assumption is you don't have trouble going to a bank and getting a loan. But a lot of people,
we do. If you're a business and you want to go get a loan at Wells Fargo, they're not going to give me a loan unless I personally guarantee it.
Right. But even that, some people can't do that, right? Whereas DeFi, you're dealing with a smart contract, right? So there's no bias, there's no discrimination. You send your Ether in or your crypto in, you follow the rules as it laid out in the code, you get your loan, you get your credit. So it just takes out that element. I mean, when you look at the numbers of the world that is underbanked or has no banking at all, it's staggering, right?
Yeah.
And that was part of my journey too, was in the US, things are actually not that bad. We complain about them, they're not that great. But in other jurisdictions, it's like there's not even a bank branch. And guess what? JP Morgan's not getting there anytime soon. But
I don't think they care.
What is there, and it's economically so expensive, right? The brick and mortar. But what they do have, what is there, is internet, smartphones. And so people can all of a sudden become banked, be part of this new financial system, and actually get access to basic financial services that allow them to build a better life for themselves, their family, and start accumulating multi-generational wealth. So that's a big part of this for me, is that you can do really well, but also do really good. I do think we can all say here that we are changing the world. There's obviously a reward to it, but usually you have to pick one or the other. It's all about the money, or you go to an NGO and you sort of like you forsake money and you change the world that way. Crypto is like you have your cake and you can eat it too.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think the biggest utility of Bitcoin is in the most underserved areas, for sure. Mm-hmm. And that was what originally sold me on Bitcoin and why I bought it, because I was like, oh, the rest of the world, we might not need it, but the rest of the world, this makes a lot of sense, especially countries like Argentina, which haven't had a good banking system in like 50 years. So, if I was Argentinian, I wouldn't have anything but Bitcoin, I don't know, Zach, are there any other questions you want to ask us? Because, with Tyler, I could talk to him forever.
Yeah, everyone loves a price target. Recently, you gave one with your brother at 500,000. Can you just talk a little bit about how you guys got to that number?
Sure. So we use the gold framework for Bitcoin. You look at the money characteristics of gold, and Bitcoin matches or beats them across the board. So gold is scarce, but Bitcoin's actually fixed. Gold is somewhat portable, but Bitcoin you can send around like an email. So when you look down the line, Bitcoin is gold 2.0. And if gold's market cap is 10 trillion, then Bitcoin's going to disrupt gold, and its market cap has to be at least 10 trillion. So that gets us to a Bitcoin price of 500,000 a Bitcoin. That matches up with the Bitcoin market cap of 10 trillion. So that's where we think that's actually the conservative small bull case, because Bitcoin is much more than gold. It's an open source.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was like, aren't you it's kind of like not a fair comparison. Gold is nothing compared to Bitcoin, Other than I can make a ring. I can make a ring.
Yeah, no, and Bitcoin also may underpin the security of other networks built on top of it. So it's kind of just a starting point, 10 trillion. But
yeah, because if you look at like monetary supply, like M1 and these terms, it's more like that than per se gold, you know? So like now it's like this global currency, and there's 21 million of them, and there's billions of people on Earth, and you start coming up with numbers. I mean, if people start using this all throughout the world, like I would think that's a conservative number.
It absolutely is. It's kind of the starting point. And so
I mean, granted, that's super long term, but yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's but not that long, right? I mean,
right.
The internet didn't take that long. I mean, I think we're talking inside a decade.
Yeah, I mean, gold is 5,000 years, though. You got to give gold a little credit. It took them a while.
Yeah, so Bitcoin's market cap right now is about 10 trillion. So easily a 10x from here. But Bitcoin is obviously so much more than gold. I think the price is around 50 or 60 grand today. So there's quite an appreciation. There's not many stocks or companies, certainly not currencies, that will appreciate 10x inside of the next decade or less. So that's sort of the starting point price prediction. But like once people dive into Bitcoin and dive into crypto and understand what's going on, it's so much more. I mean, probably the right analogy is sort of like people thought Google was too expensive or Amazon or 10 years ago, and they were wrong. And people think that Tesla's too expensive, but they don't understand.
Right.
It's not a car company. It's a computer that happens to have 4 wheels. It's a renewable energy company. It's a technology company, and technology company have permission to go everywhere. Apple started with computers, went into music, phones. Now apparently they're building a car. They have permission to go everywhere, and Elon Musk has permission to go everywhere. So as long as he continues to do that, there's no limit to the value of the company and the things that he do, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you think about Bitcoin's value being something like Apple's value, and you're like, okay, that's one company and it has limitations, and now we're talking about a global currency or gold or whatever you want to call it. Thinking about 10x in 10 years seems very reasonable to me, and I think that's a fair way to look at it, and a conservative way to look at it. If it can get to gold's value at a certain point. But I think the success of Bitcoin is 100% around adoption. It's a supply and demand thing. So it's not a complicated thing to analyze. People are always like, what's your target on Bitcoin? And I go, my target is get to many people to buy Bitcoin as possible, because the value goes up if more people buy it and more people accept it, and it works. And when Square and PayPal got seriously involved, that was like, I was on Anthony Pompolino's show, like I think it was 6-8 months ago, and I was talking about Bitcoin and the utility of Bitcoin, and if Bitcoin's really going to have huge value, it has to have utility. And then I had said something like, well, if Square and PayPal get involved and you can actually use it, game over. And that's what's happening now, and that's why we've seen this big boost in Bitcoin recently. Not because people can just buy them, but if you think about a company like Square and PayPal that are connected to all the merchants, and now these companies have created an ecosystem. And I think that's what Jack has done, where I can take the Square app, buy a Bitcoin, and then use it to buy something else really easy, or choose whatever currency I want. That utility makes Bitcoin even more valuable. So I think at a certain point, we're going to see a lot of people in the world, maybe not everybody, but a large percentage of the world will just have some Bitcoin. And it will facilitate global trade in ways, in tourism, in ways that, we used to have these American Express traveler's checks. I don't know if you ever used these.
I'm familiar. Yes.
See, I'm not exactly sure how old you are. I know you're younger than me.
39.
Yeah. Okay. So you got a decade on me, but like when I was a kid, we had so you go to the bank and you get these American Express.
Our parents get them when we go to Europe.
Yeah. That's what you use for money. And like, I always thought it was weird that American Express money worked, but like our money didn't work, And like, that's why it's so hard for me, why people have such a hard time with Bitcoin. when they used to use American Express travelers checks, no problem. That's money, right? It was fungible all around the world, and I could store my value here, and it worked in other countries. But if I pulled out $100 bill, it wouldn't work. And I was always fascinated by this, and then credit cards started working internationally, and they would charge you fees. But like, if I could just use a credit card, oh, this was great. And then the utility of all these different currencies made no sense. And then the EU started, and so we really have like 3 or 4 real currencies of the world, that matter and that we all trade. And so like, I just don't think Bitcoin's that crazy of an idea. For us, it was all around security more than concept,
The crazier idea is go through a thought experiment of people inventing the dollar today. Like
right.
It's currency that it's a complete invention, it's paper, it's controlled by a very few people behind a closed door. What is it, 12? The Fed Reserve Board, is it 12 right. people? And they make all the decisions behind a closed door that we can't see. I mean, you would never invent that the way it is. That's just a legacy vestigial thing that we've inherited.
You would if you wanted to stay in power.
Right.
Okay. So when you switch it around, you have to understand money is a form of power. And you did not start a country in 1600 and use somebody else's money, right? Like, you started your own country, you killed everybody who complained about you, and you printed your own money with your picture on it. That's the first thing you do. That's what we did in America. Okay, George Washington, we put his picture on it. He won the war. It's his money. So why would we let everybody see how this works? Because we want to maintain control. And that's what it is. And that's what's happening in China right now with the digital yuan and whatever. It's about control. If they don't want Bitcoin,
Yeah, and that would have passed muster 400 years ago. Today, you would invent Bitcoin. You would invent Ether. You would invent these fair systems of money that were owned by the users of the network, that worked like your email, that were transparent, a level playing field, and fair.
I would argue that you wouldn't have done as good a job as Satoshi, because the financial crisis is what born Bitcoin, really. And that was such a horrible experience for me and just in my life, and like just the financial crisis. And so like, when you think about Bitcoin was formed in like war, like it was like, it had to be great because everything else was failing. And they were like, we're going to build this better. So I think there's something about that makes Bitcoin even better than if a bunch of people just were like, hey, let's invent money, and start from scratch, but weren't in the position that the entire traditional financial system had collapsed, because that's what happened. And so that's what gives me a lot of faith in Bitcoin, is that it was born from financial disaster, not from a bunch of smart guys who got together in a room and said, let's invent money, Yeah,
no, it's a solution.
Yeah, it's a solution.
Mm-hmm. And money is an invention that is always being iterated upon and evolving. And Bitcoin was always going to happen. It wasn't an if, it was kind of just a when, in my opinion. And so when you look at the history of money, you're like, yeah, it's been shells or precious metal, paper backed by metal, paper. And now it's cryptocurrency. And this is just a logical evolution and progression of what humans have been working on for thousands of years. So, and it's exciting because it feels like it's the, second pitch of the first inning. It's going to be an incredible next couple of decades. And we're super excited to be partnering with you guys.
Yeah, us too, because being in traditional finance my whole career and wanting to provide my clients with the best opportunities and diversification and really help people have better lives. That's what we do at my firm. It's like we're trying to help people have better lives in their future. And that's why we're so excited to work with you guys, because the hardest thing for us is watching this go on and not having a way to take advantage of it that we feel comfortable that our clients' assets will be safe.
Mhm.
And that's why I give you a lot of credit, man. I'm super stoked about this because, you could wake up and you have these nightmares, like all of a sudden it's just gone, and it's like, how do I deal with this? I don't want to ruin my career, and there are so many scams out there. There's so many stories that people get involved with stuff and it ends up working out poorly. And when we started this process, like, obviously you guys have a good reputation, but that doesn't mean a lot to me because we're going to dig under the hood no matter what, and like, I was super impressed as I started saying, like, because I think, and I think it's partially because of your background. Like, you come from a background where you get what people like us want, and I'm the most liberal of the financial people,
Mm-hmm.
So like, you come from the background of the more conservative level of the financial people, and so you knew what we would want and you put in the work because you've been working your, off for sure to build what you've been building in Gemini. And you're right. You could have just taken your Bitcoin and been happy and lived on a yacht or whatever. And so that's why I'm super excited to work with you, is like we think thousands of our clients are going to want to take advantage of this. And then, like, having the comfort that we have an institution that we can trust and work with and develop something that will really serve a group of people that aren't being served right now, because there's first adopters and there's the innovators who are willing to take the risk and open up an account with you guys or somewhere else and buy Bitcoin. But that's a very small percentage of the overall population right now. And many people want an expert like our firm or me to help them do this, do it safely, and have an institution like yours to know that at the end of the day, that these guys are working to protect our assets. Now, we've also done other things to protect our clients outside of what Gemini's done, like buying extra layers of insurance and so on and so forth, and developing new protocols. But it ultimately relies on you,
Yeah.
So
No.
thank you. So thanks.
No. Thank you. We wanted to build this with institutional grade that was ready for Wall Street, but also for everyone, easy to use. So it feels like it's great to hear. I often say that our greatest asset at Gemini, and this is true by far and away, is the people we've attracted and hired to
They're sharp.
Build this great stuff. So I'm super proud of the team. It sounds like your interactions have been incredible.
Yeah. We deal with Schwab, dude. It's like,
and I got to give you guys credit. I mean, taking this leap, you're so early, and we're going to know that even more down the road, 5-10 years out. Like, this conversation will be like, oh my gosh, like, you were talking about Bitcoin. You actually gave your clients, Bitcoin exposure or the ability to get it back in 2021. That's going to be super visionary and great leadership and encourage, because a lot of your peers are probably looking at you, maybe not now, but a year or two ago or whatever, and be like, what are you talking about? Like, you crazy Bitcoin thing. But you saw that, you were there early. But more importantly, you haven't just said, oh, I'll take my position. You're like, you're going to make it possible for your customers to get it, which is, I think, an incredible gift.
Yeah. And I'm also doing it for other RIAs, like, I don't think it's competition to me. Like, I'm trying to show, like, with you, like, you can do this in a way that you follow the rules and you do the right thing, and therefore you can serve your clients correctly too. And, industries like ours have always needed people like me to do things that, not because they're scared, there is a lot to this, and we've put a lot of effort in. I'm pretty tired, like, we're launching this and like 5 other things, but we wanted to do it right. And Zach's been working tirelessly with your team, to build this program at our firm. So Zach, thank you so much. And he's really going to be leading the charge with your team in building the, sort of the day-to-day stuff as we build this out. But we're really trying to be a model for RIA. So if you're an RIA and you want to get involved with Bitcoin, reach out to Gemini. I think I'm happy to show you how we're doing things and how we do things. And we want people to be able to serve the communities wherever you are with assets that I think will be very valuable to people. And so I'm excited to be a part of the beginning of something that will be, I think, very substantial over time.
Yeah. Well said.
Zach, is there anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, we covered it all. Thank you so much for your vision, Tyler, and partnership. We're super excited for this.
Thank you, guys. Really,
thanks for coming on today too, and doing the launch with us. And honestly, I'm pretty excited about it. I'm a fan. I'll be honest. We weren't going to talk about this person, but I really, really hate this person, and I think he's done a horrible thing to our society. So, I'm really glad the story got told right eventually. I'm glad Ben took the time to tell the story right, and I'm super excited to be working with you because I do think you're a visionary in a way that we don't see often, and you've gone through a lot of ups and downs. I think you're a very evolved person, like in what you've dealt with in your life, and I'm looking forward to working with you.
Well, thank you for the kind words. Really excited to be working with you guys, and here's to the exciting days ahead.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thanks
again.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right, guys. See you later.
Yeah. Have a good one.